when you come into a movie like this, obviously you have previous experience working on other animated films, but like what kind of just in general, is there sort of a shared community where like you already know how to do, say, some of the basic character animation and then build upon that? Or is it kind of like a relearning process every time?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, Disney has done other computer animated movies before, obviously Chicken Little and Dinosaur. We have a wealth of knowledge and really talented people in that medium that are able to draw from all kinds of experiences that they've had and do's and don'ts and really were able to guide and help guide me, being new to the computer animation through the process. But at the same time, there's things that you have to discover every time. I mean, we've never done human characters in the computer before, so things like skin texture, growing hair off the heads of our character models. That kind of thing was so important for this movie because so many of our characters were human, and when they needed to be believable as humans, but they could never go too far to feeling like they're realistic humans, and they couldn't go too far the other way, feeling like they're just silly cartoon characters. So that balance was very important to strike, and there was a lot of discussions and a lot of things we had to work out to make that happen.
Well, sort of along those lines, when you first start working on something like this, and it's obviously like a sort of fantastic world, like, how tough was it to decide the level of sort of photorealism you had? Because I was really blown away by how some of the rain and the textures were just so amazingly realistic, and at the same time, you had a great juxtaposition between that and sort of like the I don't want to say cartoony as a criticism, but like cartoonishness of the characters.
You have to always, I think, be thinking about making the world believable, making it feel like it's our world, but never losing sight of that level of caricature. That things are still designed a little bit more, even things in the present day, Lewis's time, which is very much like our time. You're just finding ways, proportion-wise, shape-wise, just to play with things a little bit so that you never get to the photorealistic place, and not getting so caught up in the minutia that is very easy to get caught up in the computer, that you lose sight of the big picture. I think always an eye towards what's the big statement we're trying to make with this thing. Let's use the details to enhance that and make it feel believable, but let's not get too caught up. There's plenty of times where we said, that's great, but nobody's ever going to see that side of that building, so let's not paint that. Or no one's ever going to see that little thing. We can avoid getting so focused on that. So that sense of the big picture always has to be in your mind.
Well, animation is even more collaborative than live action filmmaking. How tough is it to maintain sort of a cohesive directorial vision when you have people who are like, well, I'm here to do the movement, and then I'm here to do the texture on the movement, and then I'm here to do the lighting on the texture on the movement, or whatever. How tough is that?
Well, it's definitely a challenge because you have a lot of people. The great thing about this movie is that everybody bought into it and believed in it so strongly that I think they all felt like it was their own thing. It was their own movie. And I didn't really find on this movie a lot of instances where I had to work really hard to get people to invest. We screened the movie very early on in 2003, the whole movie on storyboards. And the studio there was such a groundswell of support by this building. Everybody came together and said, we want to make that movie. And so from then on, it was pretty easy. Everybody was engaged right off the bat, and then it was just about let's just solve all the things we need to solve in order to realize this and bring it up to the screen.
Well, what were you most sort of surprised about? I mean, obviously you had an idea of what you wanted this to look like, but when something came out, whether it was a sequence or a character or whatever, what surprised you most when somebody came and said, like, this is what this can look like, and it was something that was totally contrary to what you might have expected?
I think for me, it's the textural quality of the worlds and the characters you can create in the computer. Coming from the hand-drawn world, you give impressions of texture by the way you animate something or the way you paint it on the background, but it's very much implied. When you get into the computer, you feel like you can touch those things. You're seeing the sweater textures and the skin and the translucency of the skin and the shininess and reflectivity of the time machine. All those elements. It just lets you create such a believable world. That textural quality was the thing that really blew me away and made me say, hey, this is another way I can tell my story. We can design the textures, the textural quality of the past versus the future. We can manipulate that, and we can use that as a storytelling device. So that was one of the big eye-opening things for me was that that quality about the computer.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, this is a fantasy world. I mean, time machines and everything. How much of that do you try to come up with, like the physics of, like how we would do this or whatever?
We played pretty loose with it. I read some books about the potential of time travel and some of Einstein's theories, and things like the memory scanner. I read about the brain and how the brain works, but we tried to keep it pretty geared towards simple explanation of things, especially with time travel. Time travel can get so crazy and mind-blowing. We did have a few story meetings where we all were sitting there like this because we were trying to figure out the space-time continuum. And at a certain point, we thought, the rules should be you can get in this time machine, it can take you to the future, it can take you to the past, and that's about as far as it goes, so that it can be as universal as we could make it. So kids can understand it, adults can understand it. It's less science and more fantasy.
Great. Well, that and the bubble technology. I think.
I know the bubble. I let's hope someday we'll all be commuting in bubbles and not on the freeways in our cars, because that would be my dream.
Yeah. Awesome.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Thanks very
Appreciate
much.
it.